Welcome back to Rugby Rundown, third edition. Jan, every week we're shooting the lights out. First episode was fine. Second episode was double that. So let's hope this one goes even further. People like hearing your seasoned voice. You know what's happening in the world of rugby. Welcome back.
So you mean we had one viewer the first week and two in the second week?
Yeah, 4, man. People are lining up at the door. No, I'm joking. You're actually doing very well.
It's fun chatting about these things. Sometimes, just chatting news and rugby and that in general. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, what I don't know, I just find out. So if you've got, as you will well know, if you've got enough context, what you don't know and you hear a rumor, then you go and you make contact and people will let you know what's happening. So.
Well, something that broke yesterday, and neither of us know anything about it or don't know too much about it, but Rassie appointing a new performance analyst for the Springboks. I mean, that's quite big news. And Joe Lewis is the guy's name. What do you know about him? I read the press release, but I mean, where does this come from? And who is this guy? Do you have any idea?
The last I saw Joe Lewis, he was in a boxing ring back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
All serious, he's an England analyst. He was an England analyst, and that again tells me that Rassie is busy with a serious plan for next year. Rassie is not. He saw something because this guy, and I know that people speak about England's tactics, and it's boring, and I understand why. But he analyzes teams, and he analyzes Springboks in the World Cup, and he comes up with plans to counter team strengths or avoid getting, how they avoided getting into scrums because they knew their scrum was and we had to take a scrum from a mark to start forcing their forwards not to stand. And those are the days still when forwards didn't have to run up and down. They could just stand in the middle of the field and watch the ball cross over. So he's a very good analyst. I don't know much about him personally, but the fact that Rassie went after him to poach England's analyst tells me this guy has got some serious talent. And that to me is the important thing. And it's adding another bow to Rassie's quiver. Mm-hmm. There's so much IP in that squad of Rassie for next year. So it's going to be amazing to see what the Springboks come up with next. And I think this is more about seeing what happens, what developments there are. So, is England just the best kicking team? How do you counter England's kicking? Does the Wallabies going to run? What is the All Blacks going to do? So all those sort of things you analyze, and that's the key. It's not necessarily coaching. It's literally analyzing and telling Rassie they do 10 kicks a game, or they do all their kicks in the first half, and the second half they do all the running. All that sort of stuff. That's what they're after.
Well, he spent almost 9 years with England from 2017, and he was involved right until the Six Nations the other day. He was in the 2019 World Cup. For some reason, it doesn't seem to me that he was at the 2023 World Cup. I'm not sure what the story is there. But I mean, he must know exactly what England's all about. England's the first team that we're going to be playing in the new Nations Championship in South Africa. And of course, Felix Jones was at England. I wonder if Felix whispered into Rassie's ear about this guy.
It's exactly what happened. So somebody would have told Rassie, listen, this guy's much better than what he gets credit for in England. And yeah, I think that's exactly what happened is that Rassie and Rassie listens. I mean, people underestimate. People think Rassie is doing everything by himself. He's not. He's got like a real good leader. He builds a team around himself, and that helps him.
Of course, a big question. We all know the redhead guy sitting next to Rassie, and I'm not sure what his name is, but I wonder what happened to him.
So maybe he's in the background somewhere. The announcement didn't mention anything about him. So yeah, and as usual, Saru is fond of leaving important information out. It's often more about what they don't say than what they do say.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about this is normally, when a high-profile a person like this is signed, something like garden leave involved, where he has to sit out a little bit, because this guy must be carrying a lot of England IP, like you mentioned in the beginning. And for him to basically start pretty soon, very close to when the season starts, it makes you wonder. How long has this been coming? Has England been caught out a little bit on the back foot for not protecting their IP? I mean, normally, even in any other sport, if you go from one team to the other, you have to sit on the sidelines for a bit, at least 6 months normally. But no worries. He's coming over.
Yeah, it depends what was in his contract. And I think if there was a clause like that in his contract, then obviously he wouldn't have been involved this year. But clearly, as I've said, maybe he's not rated as highly in England as people as he should be, and somebody else rates him very highly, and that's usually what happens. Somebody will whisper in somebody's ear. So
yeah, well, England didn't rate Felix Jones very highly. He didn't stick around that long. I mean, we all know what Felix Jones, how good he is. Anyway, let's move on. You talked about Saru not saying too much or saying too little. Saru's director of rugby, I think, is Dave Wessels, and last night on X, and I haven't really spoken to you about this, just wanted to hear your opinion. He said something about teams having to be compensated for players being poached, because and what this refers to, there's an Aussie young prop that's now being offered big money by Ireland to come play for Ireland, because Ireland's got a problem at prop, and he was due to play for Australia, was injured, never played for Australia. That means he's still eligible. And what do you think of the idea of a team being compensated for losing a player that they've invested a lot of time and money in, and then suddenly someone else comes? And I mean, I suppose this is more to do with national sides than local sides. I'm not sure what it applies to. What do you think of that idea?
The reality is, in a modern professional era, people are going to go after. So Australia's school system is not as great. I remember in the 80s and stuff, they had a really good school system. And I suppose that school system is still there, but league is tapping into that much better than Union does. And Union's profile in Australia shrunk. And Ireland, they've got a problem with their system is very limited. They've got the 4 provinces, but the feeder system in Ireland, because Leinster dominates and it's being supported by the Irish Rugby Union, their feeder system is not as accurate or not as good as it should be. Certainly not like South Africa or maybe New Zealand's school system. So when young players like this come through, and there's a chance of them grabbing, I don't know if it's his grandmother or his mother or his father or his granduncle or something, they will latch onto that. And in this case, he knows that Ireland's profile is higher than Australia's profile, or the rugby union in Ireland is a much higher profile than what it has in Australia. So for him, there's more money to be made. There's chance of playing in the World Cup next year, and he's probably seeing himself down the pecking order in Australia. Maybe a penny has dropped at the fact that they haven't come calling again after his last chance means, yeah, that's a way to go and go and play. So should they compensate them? To get back to your question, should they compensate them? I mean, there's so many South Africans. Imagine South Africa have to be compensated for every player that plays for France or every player that plays for Scotland. It's ridiculous. So maybe that's what David's referring to. He's using this as an example. But imagine France and Australia have to pay France and Scotland. There's probably a few South Africans that played for Ireland. And the Wallabies had, the most famous one is Tiaan Strauss that won a World Cup with Australia. So after being overlooked for 95, he won a World Cup with Australia in 99. So it's not that it's coming now. It's been coming for a long time. It's been happening. Should they be compensated? South Africa will certainly like that, and I can understand why Dave says that, because imagine South Africa going to start claiming money for all the Scots, all those famous Scots names, Coetzee and Van der Merwe,
McMerwe, Max Kumar. Yeah, I hear you. All right. Okay, moving on. Asenati, he talked about his hearing last week. Any news on that?
Hot off the press, I can share with you a message that I got from the Sage boss. So I'm going to read this so that it's in their words and not my words. The closing arguments by the defense and the prosecution are scheduled for the last week of April. The parties have to agree on a date. Thereafter, the tribunal panel will deliberate and render the decision. Okay, so more or less, hopefully it won't take more than 2 weeks. But thereafter, closing arguments, I think we're looking at the end of somewhere in April, May. So we will know by June whether he's available for the Springboks or not, or whether he's. But in the meantime, this is hanging over his head. The sad part is this is hanging over the player's head, and we've already seen his form dip because it must be stressful for the player. So yeah, the long and short of it is there's more arguments to be made at the end of April. Date has to be confirmed, and then it's closing arguments, and so somewhere in May we might know exactly whether he's free to play or what's happening.
Well, can he now play in the meantime again? Is that sort of non-ban still standing, or is it now? Does he have to stand down now until the?
Absolutely. His status hasn't changed. The only reason he didn't play last week was because of the hearing and he couldn't train with the team. So now he can train with the team again. So he's got a bit of time to settle. This week the Lions are obviously not playing, so this week they can relax a bit and he can deal with it. If he needs to see somebody to clear his mind and get back on track with the Lions, get a bit more fitness into his legs, and so. But he's still able to play until he is banned. He's able to play because. Yeah, as we discussed last week, this is all about finding out whether it was deliberate or not.
Well, Leon, this is exactly why I'm talking to you, because you're plugged into everybody that moves in the rugby world. Thank you for that. That's an exclusive. I love it. On the subject of props, Marty Williams of New Zealand suddenly being out with an infection in one of his discs in his back. I mean, I haven't heard of that before, but that must be a huge setback for New Zealand. He's one of the up-and-coming props, one of the start markers, call it that. What do you hear about that?
Yeah, well, he's out for the season as far as I know. That means he's not going to play. And usually back problems for props means they're gone for the year. And if it's infection, it means there's been an underlying problem which now got infected. So first of all, you need to treat the infection, and then they need to go look what the underlying problem is. So, and he is their best prop. So I would suggest their scrum has not been the greatest in the last couple of years. So I think they further in, apart from the fact that they don't have much depth in the front row, they now got a lot less experience in the front row. So, and then you come up against a Springbok team like we have in the front row, like we have. They're going to be in trouble.
Well, it's actually quite sad. I mean, this would have been his opportunity under the new coach, Dave Rennie, and everybody else to sort of stake his claim. On this greatest rivalry tour. Imagine having to miss out on the greatest rivalry tour and not even know if you're going to be able to make it back. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. Now, let's get on to the nitty-gritty now, the stuff that I'm really interested in. Player movements. What's the story of La Rochelle now signing everybody? I heard this weekend, Hendrik Cornee broke the news about Salman Murat and David Kriel, and we've also heard whispers about Frans Malherbe maybe going there. What's the story there?
Yeah, I think Salman is because... that famous French Aussie, the Australian lock that's out for the season. So he got a Achilles injury. So now they're losing it, and I think he's going to retire in any event. Will Skelton, by the looks of it, is going to. I think his body is just, a big guy like that will always have issues because we saw it with Andries Becker and other tall guys. They always have problems, and I think Will Skelton is just his body is just finally giving up on him. And Achilles problem for a guy that even if it's going to be a year, so they need somebody for next season. So apparently they rate Murat. We know that in Cape Town everybody rates Murat, even though the rest of the country still wonders what makes him so great. But yeah, if La Rochelle comes knocking on your door, then you can't be a half-bat lock. So definitely Murat is on the radar, but he's still injured. Is he going to be back before the end of the season, before the playoffs? Who knows? He's got a fractured toe, which he got famously on that pitch, that when the pitch was in such dire condition in Cape Town. So will he be ready? Who knows? But the fact is, La Rochelle rate him. And then David Kriel, as you know, Glasgow Warriors, Franco was after him at Glasgow Warriors. But it now looks like La Rochelle's money is a bit more than what Glasgow can afford, because Glasgow is tied into the Scottish system and they can only have so much on their books.
The interesting for me, when we spoke to Franco about David Kriel, when he was still pursuing him, was he said to David, and his sons grew up with David in his house, apparently they were that close. The only way he's going to be noticed for the Springboks is if he goes and plays against South African teams. And that was the motivation for Franco trying to get him to Glasgow. I'm surprised that he didn't end up at Glasgow because of that connection. And I hear you about the money and everything else, but for me, the interesting thing is the top 14 in France is probably one of the most grueling competitions. They play week in, week out. They play 30-something games a year. I mean, Japan is like a holiday. You go over to Japan, play a couple of months of the year, get paid multi-million megabucks, and then come and have a holiday in South Africa before the international season starts. Why would you go to France for that matter? Yes, money and everything else, but I'm sure there must be other options that could basically prolong your career. That's an interesting option.
Yeah, so he will get his game time when the French internationals are not available, which is large chunks. So they have to rest in, or the La Rochelle players might actually, if they're not in the running for the playoffs or for the final, their players might be in the All Black team, and then La Rochelle will need another center. So that's
against the All Black team, not in the All Black team.
Yeah. So there's always, and that's the thing why the French clubs are so proud, because they got the money to literally have two teams on their books. You know, one that's full of their own internationals, another one that's international quality players from other countries that can fill in that gap. I mean, I think La Rochelle still got Ma Nonu. He's 40 years old, but he's still on La Rochelle's books. So they're happy to fork out that kind of money, because Ma Nonu played this last weekend for La Rochelle. And that's the type of player. So I think maybe Ma Nonu is retiring, and that's the gap that Richard's going to fill at La Rochelle.
David, yeah. His
David,
brother Richard is still at the Lions from what I know. But nowadays, I must be honest, this David Kriel thing caught me completely unawares. I thought Glasgow was successfully batted away the offer, and he was going to be happy with the Bulls. And then Hendrik broke the news on Sunday again, so I was a bit taken aback by that. I didn't expect that. And then talking about Frans Malherbe, what's the chances of him ending up at La Rochelle? We've heard it from more than one source, but nothing formal, nothing official. And Hendrik hasn't said anything about it, which typically tells me there's not much to it.
Yeah, I think the problem with France is, will he ever play again? So, and please don't get me wrong, I don't mean this derogatory in a bad way, but France is hardly running. You know, he's running straight lines, turning little bits, and now he hasn't started even training with the Stormers. Will he play again? I mean, we know that Rassie and a couple of other guys said to him, "Listen, please don't give up. You might regret it down the line." So he's trying to come back, but we also know what the issue is when props start having back problems like that. So when will he be back? And when a guy's got that issue, will a team be able to fork out a lot of money, knowing full well that there's and we've seen that happen with players. I mean, there's players that arrived in France, did a medical, and then never played.
Mm.
And then just returning home or going somewhere else. So I think the first question we have to ask, will France actually play again? I hope so, because he's one heck of a prop, you know. But yeah, that question mark, that's the first question. Will he ever play again? And then, who's going to pay for that risk?
Well, this now comes back to the compensation. I mean, is he still on the Stormers' books? Was he on the Stormers' books while he was injured? Was he still being paid by SA Rugby, that part of the Pony program? So if he now goes to La Rochelle and the Stormers lose him, would it be fair on the Stormers?
It's an insurance thing. So part of the player contract, the agreement between my players and SARU and the franchises, there's a 6 month period. So the first 6 months of his layoff and his injury, insurance would have paid. After that, the Stormers are not liable to pay him because he's not partaking. His insurance is up. So now he's got to take care of himself. His medical aid might still pay. Exactly how long that kicks in, I don't know. But the insurance would have paid the first bit. And he would have gotten a salary, but it's all part of the insurance package that they get, which they pay for. Obviously, it's not free insurance. Like me and you, they have to pay for the insurance. So that is the first 6 months is covered. After that, then he has to take care of himself. So the Springboks and the Stormers wouldn't have paid for. You know, they will only start paying again if he returns playing. That's why I said to you, will he play again? That's the first question. If he does, then all the rest. You know, do the Stormers want to take a risk? Do La Rochelle want to take a risk? Does fourth team want to take a risk?
I had it the other way around. From what I understood, the first 6 months out, and it might be because it's at a different union. The union pays keeps paying, and the insurance kicks in after 6 months. That's how I have it. So the Stormers might have a different insurance product or something.
Maybe I misunderstood that, and if I have misunderstood it, then I will apologize. But my understanding is that the first 6 months is covered by insurance. Uh, I might be wrong, so maybe I must reach out to one of my sources at my players and ask exactly how it works.
Okay, Jan, enough about player movements and everything else. Let's talk about this upcoming weekend's games. Bulls playing Glasgow Warriors, and the Stormers traveling to Toulon to take on one of the French teams. So you were at DHL Stadium this weekend, and you peppered Dabo with a couple of questions about Toulon, and to me, he didn't seem that well clued up about Toulon. Maybe he was just playing it safe or holding his cards close to his chest. What are you expecting from that game? Because that's quite a big one.
Yeah, I think it'll be a surprise to them, just like it was a surprise to me at Stade Mayol back in 2023. We go to a Springbok practice and suddenly there's this buzz, and the grandstand was full of children. Admittedly, at the time, Cheslin Kolbe was still a cult hero in Toulon, even though he wasn't playing there anymore. But the moment everywhere Cheslin went, the players had cheered, and eventually they were like, because adults sat on the main stand side, and the children were all ushered onto with their teachers and stuff. But I mean, 10,000 people at practice, and it was buzzing. I couldn't believe it. So I can imagine what a game there must be like, because the stadium takes 17,000, but it's like a cauldron, and I think that's the French. They know exactly how to create an atmosphere, and like in most French stadiums, there's a shopping complex attached to the stadium or right next to the stadium. So there's a lot of, I think Loftus have got something similar with a whole complex attached to it, and that creates a very different atmosphere. And you arrive, and there's always a buzz around the stadium, and yeah, I think they will be surprised, because the culture there, the love for rugby and the love for South Africans is very, very different to what you would like to expect in, say, England or in Ireland. And it's going to be a massive for a lot of players, because Ruan said to me none of them has played there before, which is understandable. There's only their second game against Toulon, so and these massive French players, the pack. So it's going to be a very different challenge. So I would make Toulon outright favourites on their home ground, because they will play their A team this coming weekend.
Well, interestingly enough, apparently they're not in the greatest of forms. They've now lost 2 home games in a row for the first time since 2008, and they're not having the best season of the best season ever. So yeah, I suspect the Stormers might have a better chance than we expect. I'm just interested about that cauldron that you were talking about. It's a different environment playing in France with that kind of a very knowledgeable, very passionate crowd around you. Do you think that the moment might actually be a bit too big for the Stormers?
That's my view, and I don't think Toulon's got a bad team. So yes, their form is not bad. But we saw what happened at the Bulls. They suddenly turned it around, So this might be the game where Toulon turns it around. We've seen the Lions turn it around after. Even the Sharks have won a few games. But I think the atmosphere, because the French stadiums, they just sing. They've got these. It's not like us where we ole and we play Sweet Caroline and all that rubbish. They got proper atmosphere. Suddenly you don't hear Sweet Caroline, you don't hear ole. But what you hear is French chants, real passionate French chants. And that sometimes gets to, and that's why Rassie at the World Cup had this huge boom box, and he was dragging it along, blasting the players with
I remember
all the with the La Marseillaise and stuff, because that's what they sing in the stadium. They start singing their national anthem. Okay, I mean, that's in Paris, but still, in Toulon, they're going to be singing, they're going to be chanting, and they love their chants, So they've got their own little chant, and the Stormers will suddenly find out, hold on a second, 17,000 people in that stadium is going to make a hell of a buzz, and it will be probably a surprise for the guys that haven't been there before.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the same question about the Bulls just now, but you said earlier on, is Frans Malherbe ever going to play again? And a similar question in this instance, will the Stormers really take this as seriously? Are they determined to go any further? Because if they win, they have to travel back to Cape Town to play either the Bulls or if the Bulls beat Glasgow, they have to travel back to Cape Town. If the Bulls lose to Glasgow, they will travel to Glasgow. I mean, there's so many variables. And the URC, to me, at the moment, seems to be the more attainable attainable price. What's Dobbo's attitude towards this game, do you think?
Yeah, so there's two parts to this. My part is Dobbo was blowing smoke, but Dobbo said to me, or said in that press briefing, they're giving it a full go. They want to respect this competition, but I feel he was blowing smoke. But given the team, I think if we'll see when and that's probably why they haven't named the tour squad yet. So once we see the tour squad, there is some depth. I mean, he's got some really good young props and stuff. And if he does take a young team and they get a snot club, it's going to do serious damage to those young players. Can this team win? I mean, the reality is that if they win and the Bulls win, which is it's possible. I mean, the Bulls have won in Scotstoun before. It's not the Bulls can win in Scotstoun. Stormers win there, then you've got a quarterfinal in Cape Town. Imagine that, And so part of me wants to believe Dobbo. The other part of me thinks when we see the team on Friday, we'll realize he was blowing smoke.
Yeah. I've got the sneaking suspicion you may be right. I mean, who would have thought that the Bulls and the Stormers might end up playing against each other again? Yeah, in DHL. And the stupid thing for me is they're both in Europe and they have to play each other. Why don't they just organize a game somewhere in Europe so they don't have to fly up and down all the time? Because the flying is killing everyone.
Twickenham's not bad. Or they can go start in France.
Yeah, I mean, really, make a plan. Anyway, talking about the Bulls now. You just mentioned the Bulls have beaten Glasgow before. Yes, they have, but that wasn't under Franco. Under Johan Ackermann, was under Jake White still. And Franco Smith is one of those coaches who knows everybody that plays against him. He knows these players. He knows how to play against the Bulls. And they beat Leinster handsomely. I mean, they struggled a bit more against Benetton the other day, but it was because, again, like the Stormers, after beating the Bulls, struggling to get it up against Dragons and even against Edinburgh. The point is, Glasgow is way ahead on the log in the URC. They went unbeaten in the Champions Cup so far. The Bulls scraped through, by this baloney skull kind of a thing. And now they end up playing against each other. Do you honestly think the Bulls have a chance?
Any team always has a chance because the other team might not rock up. And we've seen that happen with the Bulls. We've seen that happen with the Stormers. We've seen. So if the Bulls rock up and Glasgow Warriors perhaps have got their focus somewhere else, maybe they're having an off day. Yes, the Bulls can win. Will they win? I have my doubts, but they've got a realistic chance. So to be fair to them, they've got the players, and when those players are on song, when they not when they have a good 20 minutes, not when they have a good half, when they have a good 80 minutes, this Bulls team is capable of beating anybody. We've seen them beat Leinster in Dublin, so I have no doubt that in a knockout game they can beat Glasgow at Scotstoun. So yeah.
The thing about the Bulls, though, when they beat Leinster, you remember, think back a bit, what happened on that field in terms of physicality? They out-physicaled, if that's the right word. Johnny Sexton was so scared of those Bulls, he kept running away. You remember? And I mean, yes, I don't think Glasgow is that intimidated by the Bulls forwards or, how physical they are. They're pretty physical themselves, and they're one of the best mauling teams in the world. I'm wondering about that.
Let's be honest, Glasgow are the favourites, period. But I will not write the Bulls off. Yeah. The Bulls are one of those teams that when they rock up on the day, they can trouble any team. So, but no, Glasgow are the favourites, and if Glasgow plays to half of their potential or a bit more, they probably will win this game.
All right, so your predictions are Stormers, Toulon. Who's the winner?
Toulon by 15.
Oh, okay. And the Bulls, Glasgow?
Glasgow by 8.
Oh, closer than I expected. Now, the Bulls are sending quite a formidable team. The only player that's not really there is Nizam Kar, who injured his hamstring this past weekend, and obviously Sebastian de Klerk was out for the rest of the season. But I suspect we're going to see a little bit of an alternative team here. The lesser players, maybe like Mpile Gumede, people like that. Because I think the Bulls are sharpening their teeth for the URC. They want to go far in the URC, and I think they would welcome the opportunity to have an off weekend sort of in between now.
Yeah, look, if they lose, they're going to stay in Europe anyway because that's why they got such a big squad there, because they play URC matches there, and it's 2 important URC matches.
Dragons and Scarlets.
You might be right that team is that team is there for the URC, and again, we'll see on Friday when they announce the team. We'll be right or we'll be wrong. Yeah. So But NBA, you forgot there's another South African team playing this weekend.
Yeah, Sharks playing Connacht. I was getting to them.
You don't think it's a serious competition, but when the Sharks...
Well, the Sharks have won this one before, just the other day, not this past season, the season before. I was going to talk to you about that, because Connacht under Stuart Lancaster is suddenly a bit of a challenge. It's a much better team, don't you think?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So the Sharks are, I can understand why they want to target the Challenge Cup, because that's their one way of getting back into the Champions Cup again, because they've got a heck of a challenge to get in the top 8. You know, if they win all their games and certain results go their way, they can finish 8th, maybe 7th. But it's going to be a heck of a challenge. You know, they have to win all the URC games. So maybe they realize that their best bet to get into the Champions Cup would be to win the Challenge Cup again, like they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, the Sharks under JP didn't start that well. Then beat the Stormers twice in a row, home and away. Then started sputtering up again. Got a big hiding at Ellis Park, got a big hiding at Loftus, and then for some reason dusted off Munster 45-0, and then struggle again against Cardiff. So very inconsistent, up and down kind of performances. What are you expecting from these Sharks this weekend?
Yeah, the reality is a team like the Sharks can't, and same like the Stormers, they struggle as well to maintain the level of intensity that they showed. Let's take the Stormers, that they showed against the Bulls, and then you see the drop off for the next few weeks. It happened after the previous Bulls game, it now happened again. Same with the Sharks. They have this huge peak. So they had those 2 games against the Stormers, which is also a team that can't maintain their consistency, and the Sharks then dropped off. Then they picked it up again, and then the intensity dropped off. So the inconsistency is because they can't maintain that physicality and that intensity, which is a massive challenge if you don't have the depth. And I think because they don't have players like Etzebeth and Sia wasn't there, so they don't have those calm heads. And Andre Esterhuizen, to his credit, has done a heck of a job keeping that team together and getting him to that level. So, yeah, I mean, on the day, again, you know, like the Bulls, on the day, they can cause an upset. They can cause, they've got the potential to cause an upset. And who knows, you know, because we haven't seen the tour squad yet. Who knows, maybe Eben is playing on Saturday.
Yeah, you never know. So you reckon Connacht is the favourites? Are the favourites?
Yeah, at home, always. Now, I think the one team that will arrive there as favourites at Connacht is probably Leinster, because they arrive as favourites everywhere, even in La Rochelle and Paris. Ireland, as they say, you know, we know we'll be playing Ireland this weekend. So, and if you play Leinster, you'll be playing Ireland. So
yeah. Not this year's Leinster. This year's Leinster is much worse than the other years for some reason. We've got some interesting statistics around that. But anyway, I'll just go back to the Sharks quickly.
It's all Jacques Nienaber's fault. Listen to the Irish
media.
No,
of course it is Jacques Nienaber. I see even Rico Jani says he doesn't understand Jacques Nienaber properly. Why? What's wrong with you? Don't you understand English? Although, to his credit, I must say, this past Saturday at Loftus, the Irish press officer, Munster's press officer, I couldn't understand a word the guy was saying. I just went on his hand gestures. It looked like he was, you know, hurrying us along because I couldn't understand what the guy was saying, and he was speaking English. But anyway, so maybe I should just keep my mouth shut.
No, they've got a hectic accent. So
yes,
I think your accent to a South African accent is probably a bit of a struggle. Maybe Jacques got an Irish twang into his Afrikaans twang.
Oh yeah, it's like Stian Strauss with his Australian twang. Remember that one? Yeah. I'm going to just go back to the Sharks. You mentioned that chaotic press conferences where they were trying to explain that they're going to not let go of John Plumtree and not contract that many Springboks and everything else. Now, you mentioned Sion wasn't there and Eben wasn't there. If they're going to go towards fewer Springboks and lose a lot of experience, then maybe be able to play these players more often so the cohesion is better. Is that the best plan for them? And just tell me about that press conference, because we've been hinting about it, but you actually attended it.
The reality is this is a long-term plan. So it's not something that's going to happen and bring results next season. So they're almost probably just a bit more organized and better. So they'll have a better balance than the Lions had because they've got a bit more money. So they will have some senior players there. So I don't think Eben is going to be let go like Sia. Sia has a different reason for personal reasons, you know, getting closer to his family and his children. I know Eben also wants to get back to his family, so he's also leaning towards, when his contract's up, returning to Cape Town. But I don't know if they can afford him here. Yeah, so they will let some. They won't be recruiting as high profile because they've now realized. So I also spoke to Marco Massotti last week, and he said exactly the same thing. They realized their mistake but when they recruited all these guys, so we're going to go back to where this started. It started in COVID, and suddenly nobody had money, and they needed to build a team. There was nothing left, and they needed to build a team. So what do? They weren't able to get Cravenweek players through. There wasn't under 20 competitions. There was nothing for them. So all they had was a squad of 30-odd players. So they went and recruited a team, which was an emergency measure or whatever, and it worked for them because they got into a decent run, won a couple of competitions. They won the Challenge Cup, they won the Currie Cup, and they won the South African Shield, which is more than, the Lions won the Shield now. This is their first win in anything for about 5 or 6 years. The Bulls played in 3 finals and won nothing. The Stormers haven't won anything since 22. So or they won the Shield. The Stormers won the Shield one. But the reality is the Sharks needed to build a squad, and that was the motivation for that recruiting. But they subsequently realized that because the international rugby and the World Cup and all the other stuff that happened, they're losing out on those players because those players are gone for 6 months of the year on Springbok duty and other international duty and rest periods and all sorts of stuff. So now they understand there needs to be a better balance, and that's what they're working towards. So both the CEO and the CFO and JP and also the owner, Marco Massotti, they all realize. So as a collective, they realize, hold on a second, we were wrong. Maybe there's a need for a better balance, and that's where they're working towards. So, no, they're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just retain a bunch of under 20s. They're going to have some players, but they will let some high-profile senior players go where they can afford to and bring some youngsters. I think they've got a decent crop of locks in Durban. They just need to mature a bit. So, you're not going to find another Eben Etzebeth and tomorrow he's going to be at that level. You might find a guy with that kind of talent, but it's going to take you 5 years to bring him through to that level.
This SA under 23, what do you call it, competition, where the 4 unions play against each other. And you're allowed to pick 7 players that are not under 23, 4 in the starting lineup, and I think 3 on the bench. And what's the use of that? And is that going to work? I see one of our colleagues said it's actually a very good idea, and it's working pretty well. So you're giving your players a much better chance at warming up for the Currie Cup, and you sort of have a reserve squad for your URC if there's any injuries and the likes. Because for example, the Bulls, we saw some quite big names playing in there. Nicolaas Jansen van Rensburg played for that team. Janus Kirsten played for those teams. Those are all players that can actually, just walk into a URC side as well. In that sense, it makes sense to me as well. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea because for the last few seasons, the South African franchise coaches all complain that because the Currie Cup is the time period where it's taking place, and that's when they need to rest the URC players. They can't give the URC players or French players a run in the Currie Cup. So then the Currie Cup has become an under 20 competition. Now the Currie Cup has matured a little bit. It'll be under 23 competition, but they will allow those French players to play. So if a player comes back from an injury, he can go play there. And you're right, it's 7 players in a match 23, of which only 4 is allowed to be on the field. So, if you take if you bring an under 23 player or over 23 player on, you're probably going to have to drop somebody else off. So, you want to bring a more senior prop on, and he's replacing a young prop. You have to replace another player with a young player. So you got to keep that balance. But I think the broader picture, the bigger picture, they literally give these French players a chance to play more regularly. So you don't play the SA Cup because that's not the franchise team. So they players don't get game time there. But now they got their own competition where they get game time. And then they can also play a bit in the Currie Cup if you need be. And then obviously be available for URC and match fit for the URC.
Is the Currie Cup also going to be under 23?
At least the Stormers. I think the Bulls, I'm not sure if the Bulls said that. But the Sharks, these teams will use the bulk of their under 23 teams in the. So it's not. You ask me, it's a rule? No.
Oh, okay.
But the teams are going to use their under 23 squads. So for them, it's preparation for the Currie Cup. They've got a lot of young players that's going to play in the Currie Cup with some experience, And yeah, when the Currie Cup comes around, these guys have played together a bit before.
It makes a difference as well, because last year the other teams played in the SA Cup, and the franchise teams couldn't play. So when they started the Currie Cup, the franchise teams could pick their best players for 1 or 2 rounds, and then they couldn't anymore, and then just sort of went to pieces there. This does actually sound like a better idea to me, I would say.
Yeah. You can get your frontline players a better break during the Currie Cup. So sad as it is for an old bugger like myself, who is very traditional and love the Currie Cup and everything that it stands for. The reality is the Currie Cup is now reduced to a filler competition.
A depth building competition. Anyway, Jan, thank you so much. You've got a very busy week ahead of you. You're in the midst of a lot of things, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you for this. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to next week, man. See how accurate your predictions were.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let's hope I was wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I hope we were wrong. I would rather say, listen, stuff this Champions Cup, at least for this year. Focus on the UFC. I want a South African team to win the UFC again. I think it's time. Any South African team.
I would also like a South African team to win the Champions Cup, although as impossible as it seems. Imagine like the first UFC when nobody gave us a chance and the Stormers won. So let's see, but who knows?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, because it's going to be this knockout, then it's going to be semifinals, and then so quarterfinals, semifinals, and then finals. Yeah, so only fewer games. Maybe it's a good idea. Anyway, Jan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Till next week.